Good evening and welcome to Pearl's World Review 2018. I'm Tony Sabine.
And I'm Sonia Artero. For the first time in decades, it seemed like peace would finally prevail in Korea.
After years of tensions and threats of war, North Korea seemed willing to engage with the outside world. And that willingness saw the historic first meeting in June between the leader of North Korea and the President of the United States. New Year's Day saw the beginning of a significant shift in North Korea's relations with the outside world. In 2017, missile and nuclear weapons tests by North Korea, plus insults and threats between US President Donald Trump and North Korean leader Kim Jong-un, had many fearing war. But Kim's speech signaled Pyongyang was willing to talk to its enemies. It set off a chain of events which would culminate in the historic summit between Kim and Trump. The weeks after the New Year speech saw intense diplomacy between North and South Korea to explore ways to improve relations. The Winter Olympics in Pyeongchang in February proved to be the perfect opportunity to allow North and South Korea to show they could set aside their differences. South Korea invited the North to take part, and the two countries marched together at the opening ceremony. They even competed as a united Korea in women's ice hockey. That allowed Seoul and Pyongyang to think of the next milestone, a summit between Kim Jong-un and South Korean President Moon Jae-in. But not before Kim paid a visit to China to see President Xi Jinping in March. As North Korea's historic ally, China was keen to ensure its interests were in the mix in any thaw between Seoul, Pyongyang and Washington. Kim's visit to Beijing at the end of March was kept under wraps, but China gave him a lavish welcome. Both sides stressed their historic friendship and ways in which the two countries could help each other to enhance their interests. In April, another milestone, the meeting between Kim and Moon at the Truce House in the border village of Panmunjom. The April 27th summit was the first between the two sides in 11 years, and was significant also because both leaders briefly stepped into the other side's territory. It focused on North Korea's nuclear weapons program and the goal of denuclearization on the Korean peninsula. A declaration at the end of the summit promised that the two sides would work together to bring a formal end to the Korean War, to ensure peace and reconciliation on the peninsula. This included ridding Korea of all nuclear weapons. Then a month later, a second summit in Panmunjom. Two leaders discussed the upcoming meeting with Trump and sought to build on the peace initiatives from their first meeting. In their third summit, held in Pyongyang in September, Moon and Kim promised both sides would revive economic cooperation, voicing hope that international sanctions could end to allow such activity. The North and South also announced measures to reduce conventional military threats and ease tensions. These meetings were merely the prelude to the big one, the summit between Trump and Kim in Singapore on June the 12th. At times it looked as if it might not happen because of ongoing tension and misunderstandings. But things were ironed out and the meeting was on in Singapore. In the first summit meeting between the leaders of America and North Korea, Trump and Kim signed a joint statement agreeing to security guarantees for North Korea and a commitment to more peaceful relations in future. They also reaffirmed a commitment to denuclearization in Korea, a promise to recover the remains of soldiers killed in the Korean War, and a pledge to follow up the summit with meetings between top officials. But despite the historic Trump and Kim powwow, there was no big guarantee from the North that it would end its nuclear program. This would have included actions such as declaring a list of its nuclear weapons, facilities and materials, and a concrete timeline for denuclearization. Kim has taken some steps like dismantling his nuclear testing site and releasing American detainees. The United States responded by suspending some of its annual military drills with South Korea. Despite the promise of a second summit between Trump and Kim in 2019, the US remains reluctant to provide the North with major political or economic rewards unless the country takes significant disarmament steps. The year also saw the fall of two heavyweights of South Korean politics. In April, former President Park Geun-hye was sentenced to 24 years in jail in relation to a long-running corruption and influence peddling scandal. Months later, in October, Park's predecessor Lee Myung-bak was given 15 years on similar charges over the same political scandal. Throughout the Korean peace saga, Japan had been watching things with some apprehension. Tokyo had made frequent representations to Washington to ensure its interests were considered when Trump met Kim. But Japan could celebrate an apparent thaw in relations with China. With both China and Japan on the receiving end of US trade aggression, Beijing sought to reach out to Tokyo. At the end of October, Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe made a landmark visit to Beijing. The visit saw Abe meet with Premier Li Keqiang and President Xi Jinping. Both sides pledged to forge closer ties after years of tensions, signing a broad range of economic, trade and financial agreements. For China, 2018 was an eventful year, one which saw President Xi Jinping consolidate his power to a level not seen since the era of Mao Zedong. In March, the National People's Congress overwhelmingly approved the reappointment of Xi as a leader with no limit on the number of terms he could serve, effectively making him president for life. A constitutional change approved by the NPC allowed this to happen. The move was a major break with a political tradition put in place by former leader Deng Xiaoping in the 1980s, which stressed collective leadership instead of rule by one man. During its annual meeting, the NPC also ratified the inclusion of Xi Jinping thought in the constitution. With his role as president, Communist Party chief and head of the military now assured, Xi seems free to implement his vision for many years to come. As Xi consolidated his power, others felt the impact. In May, the former Communist Party chief of Chongqing, Sun Zhengcai, was sentenced to life imprisonment for corruption. Sun was once considered a contender for top leadership. Weeks later, the country was enthralled by the downfall of another famous personality, movie star Fan Bingbing. Although not a senior official, Fan found herself the target of the party's ruthless disciplinary machine. She was stung for avoiding paying millions in taxes and disappeared from public life. In October, she reappeared out of the blue to confess her wrongdoing, profess her loyalty to the party, along with a promise to pay her taxes. Also in October, Interpol, the global police coordination body, reported that its boss, Meng Hongwei, had gone missing after he returned home to China. His wife became concerned after he sent a text with a picture of a knife, a sign that he was in trouble. Later, China announced Meng had resigned as Interpol president, as authorities put him under investigation for bribery and other violations. Throughout 2018, reports have been streaming out of Xinjiang that large numbers of ethnic Uyghurs, Kazakhs and other Muslims were being placed in concentration camps for political indoctrination. These reports suggested that up to 1 million were in these camps as part of an Orwellian campaign of total control over every aspect of the lives of Uyghurs in Xinjiang and the rest of China. Beijing has repeatedly denied persecuting the Uyghurs. It insists security and propaganda measures in Xinjiang are for the protection of residents from the threat of Islamic terrorism. In the summer, public anger erupted over yet another health and safety scandal, this time over dodgy vaccines. Changsheng Biotechnology was accused in July of falsifying data for a rabies vaccine and manufacturing an ineffective vaccine for babies. Regulators ordered Changsheng to halt their production and recall the rabies vaccine. In August, China sacked 6 senior officials at its food and drug regulator, while Changsheng company officers were investigated. Over in Taiwan, the island was rattled by a powerful earthquake near the beginning of 2018. In early February, at least 15 people were killed and more than 200 injured when a 6.4 magnitude quake struck near the city of Hualien on the island's northeastern side. The tremor caused considerable damage, with reconstruction work estimated in the millions of dollars. Later in the year, Taiwan was rocked by a series of diplomatic earthquakes. 3 traditional allies, El Salvador, Burkina Faso and the Dominican Republic, all switched their allegiances from Taipei to Beijing. It was a major blow for Taiwan, which has accused China of trying to isolate the island from the international community. Other moves to cut Taiwan out of the global picture included Beijing putting pressure on major companies to list the island as Taiwan China on their websites. Towards the end of November, the ruling Democratic Progressive Party, or DPP, suffered serious setbacks in municipal polls. It lost key cities in mayoral elections to the more China-friendly Kuomintang. The result forced Taiwan President Tsai Ing-wen to resign as DPP chairman. Near the end of December, tragedy in Indonesia. as a volcanic eruption and resulting tsunami left more than 400 people dead. Elsewhere in Asia, a political shockwave in Malaysia. Fed up with the constant allegations of corruption and cronyism, Malaysians voted Prime Minister Najib Razak and his party out of power in May's general election. It ended the ruling coalition's grip on power since independence from Britain in 1957, and returned to power the former leader Mahathir Mohamad, who became the oldest Prime Minister at 93. Also back in the spotlight was Anwar Ibrahim, who was released from prison and secured a seat in Parliament. Soon after the election defeat, both Najib and his wife were charged with multiple counts of graft, bribery and money laundering linked to the corruption scandal of Malaysia's state fund 1MDB. Other parties were also investigated over 1MDB's dealings, including the US investment bank Goldman Sachs. Came under scrutiny for its role in helping raise funds through bond offerings for 1MDB. When we get back on the show, why trade tensions erupted in 2018. Don't go away.